All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to EMPM. That stands for Engineering Major, Philosophy Minor, and this is the channel where you can get a working aerospace engineer's opinions on topics pertaining to engineering, philosophy, politics, and various other social and cultural issues. Now, today's video maybe going to be a little bit political, but it's actually going to be more of a fun video. So what I've been doing is playing City Skylines and going through a build with you guys. And as this particular city is relatively mature. It's at the point where basically everything is completely unlocked. It's at a megalopolis level, I believe. Let's double check that. Am I at a megalopolis? Yep, a megalopolis right here. I realized I hadn't, you guys are coming into this city sort of almost I don't want to call it the tail end, but at this point, it's just kind of creative designing of the city. The budget is doing really well. There's a lot of exports. There's a lot of industries established, and so the city is very stable, not having to worry about things like budget or, labor shortages or oversupply of stuff. Well, there might be oversupply of stuff, but it's in a very stable state. And so what I thought I'd do in this episode is give you guys a little bit of city history. And that's why right now we're zoomed in on the Gruber family farm, because this is where the, county, this was the first real little township that was built in Citrus Valley. Um, and one thing that I like about some of the other City Skylines content creators is they kind of try and weave in like a little bit of a narrative of how the city started and stuff like that. And so that's what I want to do in this video. So we're looking at, again, the Gruber family farm. And let's zoom out for a little bit. So the way the city started originally was just a freeway coming in to kind of a dead end right here. And there was a gentleman. His name was George Elliot Gruber, hence the name Gruber Family Farm. Now, where did George Elliot Gruber come from? Well, he was actually fleeing a proto-communist nation. So here we go with the political stuff. Um, so in this, he was sort of leaving this nation, fortunately, before the communist revolution started, and he fortunately was privy to a lot of the revolutionary ideas that the country wanted to implement with regards to farming. So, George Eliot, Mr. Gruber, was a farmer in his previous life, and he saw some of the ideas that the Revolutionary Party wanted to implement. Well, the first thing they wanted to implement was what they called equitable farming practices, and what that meant is that the Revolutionary Party, what would eventually become the state, was basically going to be in charge of exactly what crops Mr. Gruber produced. They were going to take all those crops, confiscate them to the state, so that the state could distribute them equitably to uh, what the state perceived was the need. They felt that the free market system, where individuals who, if there was, say, a market for apples, or there's a market for grain, or there's a market for cows, they were just going to completely ignore that, and they were going to basically say to Mr. Gruber, you must produce this certain amount of cows, you must produce this certain amount of apples or whatever, and this amount of grain, and by the way, you yourself are not allowed to take any of that for yourself in order to feed your family, because you're actually well off. You're the one, you're the bourgeois, you're the one who owns the farm, and so, if we find you taking anything for yourself, we're actually going to arrest you, and we're going to completely shut down your farm, or we're just going to give it to somebody else, who we deem to be someone who fairly deserves it. And so Mr. Gruber said, well, I don't really like that. I want to grow not only what I want to grow, but I want to grow things that the community needs. And I want the community to, be able to come visit the farm directly, and obviously I want to be able to feed my own family as well. And I'm a free market capitalist kind of guy, and I'm not really interested in this government confiscation and distribution. I know what's going to happen with that is, let's say I produce 10 bales of hay. The government's going to come take all 10 bales of hay, then they're going to siphon off 5 or 6 bales of hay to all the revolutionary bureaucrats that took over the country, violently, by the way, which is what you guys are planning to do. And after you've siphoned that little bit off the top so that the elite revolutionaries have basically more than their fill, then you're going to distribute that remaining 3 or 4 or whatever I said bales of hay across many millions of people. And I think what's going to happen with that is you guys are going to have food shortages, and people are going to starve, and the overall success of individuals is going to go down, and more people are going to be impoverished because they don't have any food. And then if anybody wants to start their own farm to grow food, the state's going to say the same thing to them. And just FYI, for some historical context, this story is what happened in the Soviet Union. So anyway, Mr. Gruber, he said, I'm not down with that. I need to get out of here. I'm going to take my family. I'm going to move to greener pastures. So he found, this nice area right here. It's relatively remote coastline. Not too much extreme weather. Gets, due to this mountain range, there is a lot of, precipitation that falls on there. There's flowing fresh water, connects up to the ocean. It's relatively remote, so it's a faraway shipping route. That's okay. He knew that the summers were going to be very hot and dry, and the winters were likely going to be very cold because of the proximity to the mountains and the ocean. But he knew that this was a place where he could be free. And so he decided that he was going to found Gruber Farm Town over here. Let's just go ahead. So that's what this area is right here. And originally it was basically just this block, this set of blocks right here with dirt roads. And he started a small farm. Now, at the time of the founding, this overall area, this overall county, I guess you'd call it, didn't have a name. But one thing that Mr. Gruber really liked to grow was citrus fruits. He liked to grow oranges specifically. And so the original crop that he planted was this field of oranges right here. And of course, he created a small animal pasture. And later on, he started adding additional types of crops as the city grew and started to prosper. And more and more people came to the community to find freedom and be able to basically pursue their own wants and needs. Businesses developed around selling Mr. Gruber's materials, and the state typically stayed pretty uninvolved, pretty much just enforcing laws against violent crime and protecting citizens' rights. The town grew and grew, and eventually became kind of a sprawling little suburb like you see today. Now, the one thing that the city was willing to work with Mr. Gruber on was making sure that there was nice pedestrian connectivity. So Mr. Gruber really liked the idea of local businesses, people patronizing local businesses to be able to walk into his farm and see all these nice things that he put together. And so, the community surrounding here really focused a lot on walkability and pedestrian connectivity, and that's why the city worked with Mr. Gruber to make sure that there's very wide walkways and bike lanes. As the town grew, there was a need for electricity. There was a need for fuels to power the vehicles. There was a need to heat and cool homes in the winter. And originally, this industrial area was built. It was not originally called Steelstream. We'll get to that in a second. But the first way that, you know, the Gruber farm town and, you know, eventually the town of Bilker, immediately next to it, was powered was actually with coal power plants. And the town recognized that coal power plants, you know, uh, can result in some pollution, can result in some slightly reduced air quality. But at the time, it was, you know, the most efficient and abundant power source because of the proximity to the mountains. They knew there was a lot of ore and, you know, coal resources kind of lining these mountains over here. And also coal could be imported relatively cheaply. In addition, you know, the maintenance of the coal power plants was relatively straightforward. There was that kind of working skill set within the community. It was at the time a very abundant source of energy, as we mentioned. It was a reliable source of energy. It was scalable, so you know, if electricity demand was high, you pretty much just fire in more coal and you're good to go. And they knew that this power source wasn't dependent on a lot of other natural factors like how bright the sun is shining or, you know, how fast the wind is blowing. And the community was willing to accept a little bit of environmental risk in order to have affordable, reliable, abundant energy that was inexpensive for the residents, and could you know, power very large swaths of the city while taking up very minimal space. So originally there were some coal power plants here, and around the time that these coal power plants were being developed, there was another gentleman who wanted to move to town. Magnus Harold Steelstream. Sorry, I had to glance down at my notes because I was forgetting the middle name there. Magnus Harold Steelstream. Now, incidentally, Magnus was actually from the same place as Mr. Gruber, but he did not get out nearly in time. He lived through the violent and bloody revolutionary period where the communists took over the country, and he actually narrowly escaped essentially being arrested and thrown into basically a forced labor camp. And one of the big labor camps that was instituted was a logging industry. And so Mr. Steelstream, you know, he had an idea of what the logging operations look like. And very similar to the farming, the way the revolutionaries decided to run the logging industry was that, you know, they would confiscate all the, you know, logging products. You know, every felled tree would go to the state, and the state would basically, you know, decide exactly which trees would be able to be cut down, you know, exactly what equipment was going to be used. Typically the equipment that they wanted to use was inferior equipment, you know, basically just axes and saws. Even though there was technology that existed in order to do this much more efficiently, the state felt that that was too expensive, and that was bourgeois technology from the West, so they basically banned all that. And Mr. Steelstream was not looking forward to having to cut down and fell random trees in the snow at, you know, negative 20 degrees below during the winter, only to, you know, just get paid in like 20 ounces of bread every day and a little bit of nasty soupy dishwater with horse blood in it. Because at that point, you know, the revolutionaries, they unfortunately didn't really know what they were doing, and they were just forcing people to labor without any real plan. So Mr. Steelstream looked at this nice forested area right here when he came to Citrus Valley. As we mentioned, Citrus Valley got its name from Mr. Gruber growing citrus fruits. And he came and he said, you know, I think what I can do is I can use some of this equipment. I'm going to buy a piece of, I'm going to buy a chainsaw, and I'm going to start cutting down trees. And I'm going to sell these trees to people who want to build homes, to businesses that need lumber products. Maybe they're building furniture and stuff like that. I'm going to sell that here. Now, one thing that started to happen as the Steelstream forestry developed is obviously that the rest of the town was growing. Bilker was growing, but as his logging operation increased, he knew that if he cleared out some very old, mature trees, it would be difficult for him to keep his logging operation going if he didn't, plant new trees. And he realized, maybe what I can do is I can log a certain area, and then I can plant trees there, and then in the process of logging the next area, those trees will grow to be mature enough to, get good lumber from, and then once I've logged out one area, I'll plant saplings there. I'll go back and harvest the other area. By the way, there is just a ton of forest over here, and we can do this sustainably. And Mr. Steelstream came to that conclusion completely by the will of the free market innovation. He did not need the city to come in or the state to come in and say, well, you can only use this much water, and you can only put sapling fields here, and this forest is like the sacred forest of the earth spirit, so you can't cut down any trees here. No, none of that. Mr. Steelstream, despite the rhetoric of the revolutionaries from the country he came from, he was not a crazy environment-hating nut job conspiracy theorist, and he, by his own will and volition, came up with sustainable ways to harvest the forest. So obviously at this point we had Gruber Farmtown, we had Bilker, they built the Gruber Park. At the same time, both Mr. Gruber and Mr. Steelstream were very fond of nature, actually avid hikers and mountaineering and things like that. Obviously, Mr. Gruber wanted good pedestrian connectivity, and so together they founded this wildlife refuge. Now, originally it wasn't called the Delta Beach Wildlife Refuge. It was just an open space preserve with minimal paths and things like that. Just a nice place to go out on a nice hike through the wilderness, or even maybe do some hunting. And eventually what happened is, because there was such a demand for higher skill sets, a gentleman named Warner Delta took notice of this budding city that was just growing exponentially. So he came in and he said, you know what I think this town could really use is a university. We're going to need new technologies for the logging industry. We're going to want to help people understand all the new technologies that went into the farming industry over here. The farm's growing. We have a lot of different needs for, again, a different type of workforce, a higher skilled workforce. And so Warner Delta said, look, I want to build a technical university here. A university where obviously someone can study the humanities if they want, but really this is going to be a technical university where people learn skills in engineering, things like structural analysis, mechanical design, mechanical interfacing, various different technology, innovation, things like that. And so he founded the Delta Polytechnic University, and that is how the city of downtown Delta and Delta City were founded. So just to take a high-level history, we had small town, Gruber farm town. The farm began to expand. That expanded into the town of Bilker. We had a little bit of an industrial area over here that was surrounding the coal power plant and various industries distributing into that. Mr. Steelstream came in and started the forestry industry. Warner Delta came, and he kind of started building around here. He built the university. We eventually coined the area that Mr. Gruber and Mr. Steelstream put together as the Delta Beach Wildlife Refuge. Founded Delta City, started getting some sports teams involved. Citrus Arena for basketball, got a track team, swim club, and eventually, as the university started to grow, they are now considering a football team. Now, once this university was started, obviously this attracted a lot of young people and families to the city, and the most reasonable place to expand into and also create, college students would start to flock to this area around the beach because they wanted to party, they wanted to camp on the beach. It's right off the campus. The fraternity houses along here could really use this, and so University Beach started as a place where colleges came in to party, but there was also a lot of high value, water access area over here. And so, parents, more affluent families started to move in and living in Preston Village and the Aqua District, where they could send their kids to schools in this area and eventually could, be within a quick skip and a jump away from the Delta Polytechnic University. Now, when that stuff was founded, traffic obviously throughout the region started becoming a little bit more intense. And so the city decided to invest in a public transportation network. But, the way that this network was developed was really a partnership between all the big families in the city. It was, Mr. Delta putting in funds. He wanted good access to his university. Mr. Steelstream putting in funds because he wanted his workers to be able to, come learn new skill sets, maybe take night classes. And Mr. Gruber, just really loving the fact that his original city was developing. He also pitched in some money, and they started this nice subway network. And you can see it is getting a lot of use now. So just to step away from the history for a second, I actually did do some work on the city outside of recording last night, and that's because something strange has happened. I think it was maybe with one of the the visualization game modifications, and I'll talk about what mods I'm using. This is basically mostly a vanilla build with a couple mods in there that are just for visualization, but something was going on where the metro tracks were sinking below the actual asset in the station, creating these blue spots where the the game skins were tearing. So I had to replace a bunch of these subway stations and redo almost every single subway line. It was pretty annoying. But going into this view up here, so the original subway line went from the university, came along this main thoroughfare over here, and basically just ping-pong back and forth between here and here. Stations were added in the Aqua District and Preston Village, and there was a line built to go down to University Beach. So if you were just getting done in the laboratory area over here after a sporting event, you hop on the metro and go down to the beach and just party it out and drink a bunch of liquor and pass out on the beach. And then of course a line came down through downtown Delta. Maybe all the you know, maybe all the what do you call them, more affluent females wanted to go to downtown Delta. And so, you know, obviously the guys come and flock down there as well. If you were somebody who's really into camping and hiking and stuff, you just take the metro down to the wildlife refuge, the main entrance, or, you know, the many side entrances here, this large park. And yeah, so with that, you know, the city was growing, and this originally was a really small roundabout, you know, dirt road, just kind of, well, maybe I made it a paved road, but anyway, small roundabout, couldn't really handle a lot of traffic, and there was like a ton of backup here, and especially when the town of Lupine Square, or the city of Lupine Square was developed, this intersection was really getting loaded a lot. And there was a couple issues with that. So again, you know, the Steelstream industry and the Gruber farm, they were noticing that, you know, a lot of their freight traffic was loading onto this intersection. It was difficult for trucks. You know, people felt that it was dangerous driving around here, and so this, you know, this freeway network was built. You know, the town of Mirage Gardens was started, as well as the town of Monarch. Now, around the time that development was expanding into this area, there was a gentleman who grew up in the community whose name was Eddie Losch. And as a kid, Eddie Losch loved heavy industries. He loved, you know, these large trucks. He loved, you know, the giant turbines that were made in the coal power plants. Eventually, the coal power plants were upgraded to oil power plants when he was, you know, in his mid-20s, and he realized that there was a big need for oil. Well, what he realized is that right outside of the original town of Mirage was this nice, beautiful area right here that was incredibly dense with oil. Now, he knew that there were a lot of other oil areas, you know, namely way out here and over here, but this one was incredibly close right here. And he also knew that, you know, with the type of refining technology, he actually didn't need to take up that much space to, you know, mine for oil. He knew that the pollution could be relatively well contained. And so he, you know, got with, you know, the families of the town, and obviously the town. He said, you know, how about this? I want to start, you know, basically having our own oil production. We can export that. We can make the city a lot of money. You know, we can use that domestically. Obviously, a lot of the new farming equipment is using a lot of oil. You know, the factories that process all the wood from the forestry industry require that. You know, we can make power plants with it. And you know, let's try this out. So he starts pumping oil, and the city says, you know, and residents, they say, you know, it seems like, you know, there's a little bit of contaminants getting into the water supply, and you know, is there anything that we can do about that? And Mr. Losch originally is resistant. He says, you know, well, we have a lot of other water sources. We can switch our water sources and stuff like that. Mr. Gruber, on the other hand, said, you know, we need this water actually to be good quality because I need to use it to water my crops. And fortunately, you know, there was Mr. Losch realized, okay, well, I'll tell you what, you know, we can, you know, separate our pipelines from here. We can do a little bit more on reducing the contamination to the water supply. And so Mr. Losch basically started building this awesome refinery, and the city started making just a ton of money. They also started making plastics for more advanced construction opportunities, powering equipment, powering the city. Again, another reliable, abundant, and inexpensive, not space intensive, and relatively easy to prevent, pollution in the near term and in the long term industry. And so we got this oil industry here. And of course now we had three major industries, funding, bringing profit, bringing business, bringing skill sets into the city. Things were expanding like crazy. Then we got the town of Elliot right here, and in the Elliot is obviously named after Gruber, George Elliot Gruber, his middle name, and in the spirit of by this time the original Mr. Gruber passed away. It had been many years. And Mr. Steelstream is like in his 90s. Eddie Losch is in his 50s and 60s, getting ready to pass on his business to his children. But in the spirit of Mr. Gruber's desire for pedestrian connectivity and open spaces, when the city was putting together plans for this, they made sure to take input in the family of having a lot of pedestrian connectivity. Obviously a nice, really nice bike path that goes all the way along here. You can see it's getting excellent ridership here. The city was planned to have the trolley just come right here down the center with paths on either side. And so, really a nice area developed in Elliot for, these, a lot more of like the affluent people moving in. And, not just affluent people, people who grew up around the farm their entire life and their kids went to the Polytechnic University, and, they could come out here and, this town is, I should say the county of Citrus Valley has always been a free market capitalist, low taxes, as minimal regulation as possible on businesses, without, very, very big on preserving the rights of the people. You might even say that it's a relatively religious community, and so, basically everywhere taxes are lowered to their absolute minimum on, development, so that we can, really get some nice varied single-family homes versus apartments, and a flourishing commercial and office-style uses here. Last stop on the history before we get into the territory where you guys joined up. So we had all the industries. We got this nice rail yard developed here, and just to show you guys, here's one of the mods that I use, which just makes these freight trains really nice and long. The vanilla game freight trains are like really short and they run on electricity, along the rail lines, but I wanted to get some good like oil/diesel trains in here that can really haul some significant loads here. And so like look at this train right here. So this is like a vanilla game train. It might even be longer than the regular vanilla game train, but obviously it's not like these giant snake freight trains that come with the mod. So I've got like an asset mod on here to put new freight trains in here, but in terms of like track development and stuff like that, that's all vanilla game stuff. Same thing with like road development. So I'll discuss mods in a different video, but this is getting long. So we've got a lot of different skill sets coming in, that are in the town, and that's basically when the Orebell Peninsula was built. The freeway was expanded into here, and the way that this, the vision of this was so that when you view You know, let's say you're living over here, or you're hanging out over here at the wildlife refuge, you really get a good vista of, you know, nice transition between, you know, I guess some of these are high-rise buildings as well, but a good transition between kind of like lower density to higher density, and then in the background you just see this whopping downtown. And look at this right here. You can see just right up the main thoroughfare there, the city divided by these two things with the public transportation trolley going through there. So guys, that is how the county of Citrus Valley and all its various subtowns got started. I hope that you guys enjoyed that backstory a little bit. And I wanted to weave in some of these. So I just finished reading volume 3 of the Gulag Archipelago today, so I've now read all 3 volumes. And that book is incredible, and it details a very comprehensive history of essentially what allowed the Soviet Union to become what it was. And, you know, again, with these episodes, I want to weave in, you know, some culture in here, and some conservative culture, and you know, really detail out some of the things that happened, which created, you know, such a dystopian nightmare, not only in the Soviet Union, but basically in every single communist country. And I think that if people can kind of connect with those ideas, like not just from the level of hearing about them and reading about them, but connecting them with, you know, something like gaming, or, you know, just some other cultural things, you know, city building, engineering and design, philosophy in general. Um, if people start connecting, you know, how to be successful, you know, in those avenues of life with, you know, how to avoid things that happened in communist countries, I think that that is a benefit for everybody. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, this one's really long, but in the next video we'll get into some more city building, and also just discussing other various political topics and stuff like that. I've really been enjoying doing this. If you guys enjoy this, leave a comment. If you are, you know, if you're annoyed about the kind of like political overtones and stuff like that, and you just want to play the, you know, the city planner game, hey, or the city skylines game, hey, you know, go ahead and follow a different channel that doesn't weave that in. But I want to build conservative culture here, and I want to show people that, you know, conservatives, you know, can be creative, can make things beautiful, you know, do have the interests of, you know, individual success, family success, things like that in mind. We're not just like a bunch of, you know, conspiracy theorists that sit around and want to drone up, you know, ways to eliminate, you know, things that people think are fun and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and hop off now. Again, hope you guys enjoyed this, and have a nice day. Later.